research for presentation. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to talk about English as a corporate official language. Actually, the company which implemented English as a corporate official language about 10 years ago. And I did a study between 2014 and 2018. It's a sort of longitudinal study. And I actually explored the impact on employees and other people related to that company. As you know, globalization and shrinking domestic market, that is, Japan. Because globalization, Asian globalization, and also Japanese market is shrinking because of aging population and low birth rate. So that has been the problem. So that the company I studied, probably you know which company, but I'm not going to talk about the exact name of the company. But that companies implemented English as their official language. And most of Japanese companies they think that they must use English in order to compete globally. And then, as you know, as I mentioned, aging and shrinking population is a problem in Japan. And then other Asian countries, even China or Korea. And then there's something called the Japanification. Many people, especially finance, are talking about Japanification, which is caused by low growth and aging population, and then low interest rate. However, low interest rate situation is changing now, so we should talk about that some other time. But for the moment, I like to talk about this thing, the background. And then there are decreasing sales because of older people tend to not to spend too much money, and also human resource shortages. And then Japanese companies feel that they have urge to globalize, and that's the motive for the company to use English. However, there's a language issue in business, and language in business is researched by increasing number of researchers in the field of international business and then management, as well as sociolinguistics or applied linguists in last decade, mostly in Europe. I attended a conference last month, and most of European people had the same sort of urge. French or German scholars, they said that before, long time ago, before now, English became international, de facto international language. They wrote papers in German or French, but nowadays they have so much pressure to write everything in English. So they are facing the same problem. However, their language is Western language, very similar to English, so they speak much better English than most of the Japanese scholars. And then, as you may have noticed, that little empirical research has been conducted to find out the impact and implications of using English as a common language, or official language in Japanese companies. So what I did was, I think I should skip because I don't have much time. I researched this company and interviewed their former employees and then current employees, and also human resource executives. And then actually about Rakuten and Nissan and Rakuten Uniqlo are reported to be using English. However, Rakuten really made a big announcement, so people got, actually the company got so much attention. And then I have to mention about, one second, sorry, I'm not doing very well. Do you know, are you aware of this English, what English is? Saeko, Kachuru Saeko. And then there's a study called English as Lingua Franca. English as Lingua Franca is a sort of group of researchers studying about English use by non-native speakers. And then I actually did another survey recently, actually in April, and I surveyed about 100 people, 100 Japanese business people, and I asked them, who do you use English most? And then half of the people said that they speak with native English speakers. They didn't say nationality, Australian English, but they said that they use English with native speakers. But more than half said that they use English with non-native English speakers. So actually, many Japanese are using English to communicate with non-native English speakers. So this contributes in World English is, in this case, inner circle, USA, native speakers. And then outer circle, Singapore, India, where English is official language. And then former British colonies, most of them. And then this is expanding circle. This is the area Japan belongs to. Japan, Korea, Russia, Brazil, China. And then those countries are also using English. But they use English differently from native English speakers. Or outer circle, this one is like ENL, English as a native speaker. This is ESL, English as a second language. Like in India, they may speak their local languages, but they go out, or when they go to school, or if they go to local government, they use English, right? So that is like English as a second language. So they have to use English for daily life. And this one, China, Japan, Korea, Russia, Brazil, English is sort of treated as a foreign language. Okay? And then Japan, I like to talk about Japan, my country. It's a monolingual society, or considered to be monolingual, although there are minorities, traditional minorities living in Japan. And then Japanese never forced to use any other languages other than Japanese. Yeah? And then generally perceived as monolingual country, that's what I said already. And then however, diversity in language and ethnicity is increasing in recent years. And then Japan, And then also some scholars saying that English has been perceived as a survival skill in Japan, and then competence to be learned for communication outside Japan rather than using it within the country. And then foreign languages are learned predominantly to fulfill external needs. People feel there is very little need to use foreign languages internally, and therefore are not very motivated to learn them. Okay? And then also, this is very important point. Compared with other countries, many countries make, how can I say, state which country is their national language and which language is official language. However, Japan belongs to culturally expanding circle I just mentioned, but no language has official status. So English is widely studied as a first foreign language, and also that is de facto for second language in Japan. However, even Japanese government or Japanese constitution, there's no mention about the official language or national language. So we just use it. We just take it for granted that Japanese we use for domestic purpose, and then when we go out of Japan, we use English. So if you look at Japanese passport is written in English and Japanese. So we have this kind of very fuzzy idea about language as compared with other countries which has very strong attachment or very strong feeling about their own language. Japanese are sort of, kind of relaxed idea about their own language. And then my study, research question, I studied this company which implemented English as official language. And the research question was, what's the goal and the purpose of the language policy? And then what are the impacts and the implications of the language policy? And then the second one is more important for me when I started. So actually, I interviewed about 15 people, yes. So unstructured interview question. And also I interviewed HR director and a global HR manager. And they said that purpose of the language policy, implementing English as official language, first they said that they like to seek best talent globally, because especially IT, because company is an e-commerce company, and they use those e-commerce technology a lot. So they needed people. However, they couldn't find many qualified Japanese engineers. So they try to, how can I say, their goal is to recruit more international engineers. And then they wanted to create synergy within the whole group. Because at that time, when I started interviewing the company, they had the foreign subsidiaries. Because sort of the IT bubble when the company started. So they had lots of cash. So they acquired many companies outside Japan. However, a few, actually, as I said, I studied the company until 2018. By 2018, all the subsidiaries, foreign subsidiaries, are not really existing. They couldn't even sell they couldn't even sell these subsidiaries. They just disappeared or went out of business. So company became more domestic oriented. Okay? So actually they tried to do this, but they didn't really succeed in this. And then another thing is there are lots of new businesses coming out, such as, like in Japan it is not very common, but Airbnb or Uber, many, internet sort of related new businesses emerging everywhere. So they think, it is important for them to understand English so that they can access faster to worldwide information, especially business information, new business. And also they think that learning or speaking language would make their view much more broader. So that's 4 purposes they mentioned when I interviewed them. And then what happened? I interviewed one person I couldn't find. It was very difficult in the beginning to find the person who cooperated with the research. And a friend of mine teaches at the Lakeland University Business School. One of his students was working for this company, and he really was friendly, and then he cooperated with me. And he said that, when he joined the company was completely Japanese environment. Even the company name was written in kanji at that time. Okay? And then he felt very uncomfortable, and he has to use in meetings. Besides, his job didn't require English because all his clients are Japanese. So the policy was enacted in 2012. In the beginning, Japanese was banned. They are prohibited, or how can I say, they are discouraged to use Japanese. They are encouraged to write everything in English and speak English even with Japanese. And then he said that it took a long time for him to write emails and daily report, and he ended up using Google Translation because it took a really long time for him. And then after 6 months, people began to realize, it is not a good idea to try to use English, spending so much time in trying to use English. So little by little, they began using Japanese, they said. So they can use Japanese. And then when I interviewed 2018, company is more or less using Japanese. And then they use English once a week when CEO makes speech in English. And then what I found was confusion and chaos. Because some people even left the company, they didn't want to use English. So, employee said that I was overwhelmed, and all day was unreasonable. All day means, speak English all day is unreasonable. So they decided, times they speak English. Yeah? And then they began using Japanese. So I asked when it's okay to become to use English, to use English. Then there's no official announcement, but gradually people began to use Japanese, not English, I'm sorry, Japanese. And then, however, English is still used in some departments where they use English. R&D development, because those engineers, computer language is almost English, right? So they have to know the English. And also, they hire people outside Japan. However, they are not native speakers. They mostly came from China and India. Okay? And R&D has 70% overseas people. And then mostly they are from India. And then the person I interviewed didn't see any Taiwanese, but there are some Koreans too. So very few native speakers. So also this global HR department is very interesting. They have different kinds of nationalities. But when I talked to global HR manager, he said that there is no American. So basically, my impression was, although they use English, most of the people who work there are not native speakers. So they use English as a lingua franca, the contact language. Their N1 is not English. And then, this is interesting. They said that they they made a list of language, tangocho. Tangocho is, I don't know how to say that in English. List of terminologies they use. And then in English, you see, if you write in English, you try to repeat same words. It's not very good writing, right? So you try to use different words for same thing, but that's confused non-native speakers. So they decided to use one word for one thing. So they made a list of words. So they actually, this department stays speaking English because there are many non-Japanese people, and then they have to speak English. So, I'm sorry, I'm talking. So, English only policy imposed the challenges, and then business was impeded, and there was a communication problem. However, managers meeting are done in English, and then what they complained was, they prepared wonderful PowerPoint, taking so long, and then, they actually work so many hours to create wonderful PowerPoint. And they do presentation, but after presentation, there's no discussion, no question, because they are sort of afraid of speaking English in front of many people. And that department also, they have unique English as a lingua franca, like standard English for them. They call it the standard English. That is like, common denominator kind of English, because there are varying proficiency, how can I say that? Each people has different kind of proficiency. So basically, they try to speak English in a zero.
Yeah, finish it.
Yeah, okay. So point I like to make is, usually I have half an hour. So point I like to make is, English only policy didn't work because there is no compelling reason for them to speak English. For Japanese people to be able to speak English, or at least communicate English, is environment has to be multilingual. Because English works as a contact language or lingua franca between the people who don't share first language. But in this case, CEO has a very, it's a top-down big company, so they actually forced everybody to speak English. However, so my suggestion what I learned from here is, sorry. First of all, corporate language policy has to be more clear. They have to really show what they like to achieve. And then another thing is they should have more non-native speakers inside the environment of organization so that they feel more urge or, how can I say, pressure or actual justification to speak English. So actually teaching English only, like, for example, typical language school, only Japanese learning, and then teacher is not native speaker. That kind of environment is not very effective. Most important thing is, inside of their mind, we have to motivate people to speak English, or there should be some compelling reason, or how can I say, many, yeah. So what I'm saying is,
can we go to the questions?
Okay. I'm sorry because I like to say more things, but
maybe
any questions?
We have 5 minutes for questions.
Okay.
So please.
Any comment?
Philippe Debrou from Lakeland University. That I would like to raise a question of English, of course, but also of Japanese language in Japanese companies.
Yeah.
What you call that, well, everybody recognizes that English is now the meta language.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important. But what you said is, well, while in Rakuten and other companies, they decided to
Right,
rethink
yeah.
about that. But it's not finished my
Yeah,
question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't talk about this, but the point.
Yeah, but then my point is that if you think about that people are allowed to speak now in Japanese and so on, it also calls for foreign people to learn Japanese.
That's right.
To
But
have
they
a
didn't
kind
provide
of that kind of bilingual
right.
organization.
But, sure. They didn't provide language program for foreigners, like Chinese or Indians. They expected gaijin or foreigners, non-Japanese, should speak English. So that's one problem, they have this monolingual myopia, because Japan has been monolingual for so many years, right? And also they don't really think about, those company know-how or, lots of accumulated know-how or, how can I say that, those expertise, knowledge, those things, right? However, they didn't really pay attention to that because there are lots of tacit knowledge in it. However, they think just changing the language can change everything. Miraculously, company become globally, how can I say, global company. And then they didn't pay much of attention to their traditional culture or business practices. And that's, I call monolingual myopia. I wanted to talk about that, and unfortunately, I'm not very good presenter, so I'm running out of time. But point I like to make is Japanese has this tendency to completely ignore the sort of danger of using language. Language is it's not just a code. It has a lot of culture and lots of things behind, and then it can be poison to culture too. So they completely ignore that point. That's what I want to talk about this time. But I'm very sorry, I don't have much time. Go ahead.
Another possible reason for monolingual myopia is this kind of protectionism for Japanese jobs. So, for example, I'm from England. You had Boris Johnson saying English jobs for English workers. You have Trump saying American jobs for American workers.
Definitely.
That's quite a common thing.
Yeah.
So monolingualism in Japan means only the top jobs will go to a native Japanese person.
That's right.
That's quite a comfortable position for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what your conclusion was, English is only used when it has to be used. You've come right back to square one where the people in charge of the Japanese companies must be Japanese.
Right.
And that's a lot of people
Yeah,
are very
that
happy
has to be
with
changed because that's maybe the one reason why Japanese company has been so sluggish. One more thing I'd like to point out is, you see, if you have this one, Japanese people used to make these things very well. However, difference between what Japanese made and this is connected to internet. And this one has more service around this thing. It's not just standalone electronic, gadget. You see, Japanese used to make these things very well, but when it comes to, servitization of the electronic product, they are not very good because they are so bad in the cultural side. And they don't understand the foreign culture or other culture, so that they can't really think about design a product like this. And then one more thing I'd like to point out. You see, if Japanese make product, it's like this, lots of buttons. And you have to learn. To learn this, you have to have, how do you say it? That the manual. Yeah, it's this big. I bought one DVR from Toshiba, and then I have to read this, and I couldn't believe it. Whereas this one, how many buttons do you have? One. Yeah. And you can do everything, right? This is the difference between Japanese products and foreign products, American products. How can I say? World globally popular products. So I think, these things are a problem for Japanese economy, and I'm very sorry. You know what I'm trying to say?
We have to stop now. If we have time at the end, we'll...
Yeah, okay. I'm very sorry. I'm not very good presenter. Actually, this was, I wrote for half an hour after the...
Our next speaker is Frederick Ozawa from Yokohama City University.